The silk of my wedding dress was still cold against my skin when they heard him lock the bedroom door from the inside. I remember the click of that lock. Precise, deliberate, final. My new husband, Nathan Hargrove, heir to one of the wealthiest families in Connecticut, stood with his back against the door, and in the dim light of the honeymoon suite, I saw something on his face that I'd never seen before. Not during our brief engagement, not during the rehearsal dinner, not even during the ceremony when his hand trembled placing the ring on my finger. It was fear. "Jessica," he said, and his voice cracked on the second syllable. "There's something I need to tell you before anything else happens tonight." I was 23 years old. I'd been married for exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, and the man my parents had essentially sold me to was about to shatter every assumption I'd had about why I was standing in that room. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up in a $4,200 a night honeymoon suite at the Mark Hotel in Manhattan, married to a man I barely knew, terrified of what came next, you need to understand where I came from. And more importantly, you need to understand what my mother was willing to do for money. Let me take you back 18 months. Back to when life wasn't glamorous, wasn't dramatic, wasn't anything you'd write a story about. Back to a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where the radiator clanked like a prisoner tapping on pipes, and the carpet smelled like decades of other people's lives. That was home. Apartment 4C, Seaview Terrace, which had no view of the sea and no terrace, just a parking lot and a dumpster that the city forgot to empty every other week. I lived there with my mum, Linda, and my younger sister, Chloe, who was 17 and already smarter than both of us combined. My dad had left when I was 14. Not dramatically, no slamming doors, no screaming matches at Thanksgiving. He just went to work one Tuesday at the tire shop on Route 1 and never came back. We found out later he'd moved to Florida with a woman named Patrice, who sold timeshares in Sarasota. He sent a check for $200 the first Christmas, then $100 the next, then nothing. Mom worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a dentist's office, doing billing and filing. Evenings at a catering company, serving hors d'oeuvres to people who didn't look at her face. She was 46, but looked 60. Her hands were always dry and cracked, and she had this way of counting cash at the kitchen table. Slowly, reverently, like each bill was a prayer that might not be answered. I worked too. I'd graduated from community college with an associate degree in business administration, a degree that qualified me to do exactly what I was already doing: answering phones at a real estate office in Fairfield. Coldwell Banker. My boss, Greg, was fine. The pay was $17.50 an hour. The health insurance was terrible. But I showed up every day, smiled at clients who were buying houses I'd never afford, and told myself this was temporary. Temporary is the most dangerous word in the English language, by the way. It's the lie we tell ourselves while years slide by. Chloe was the family's real hope. Straight A's, AP classes. She wanted to study biomedical engineering at Johns Hopkins, and she had the grades for it. What she didn't have was $58,000 a year for tuition. We'd applied for every scholarship we could find. She'd written essays until her eyes burned. But the gap between what was offered and what was needed sat in our kitchen like an uninvited guest. About $30,000 a year that simply didn't exist. Mom never talked about it directly, but I'd hear her at night whispering numbers to herself. I'd see the browser history on the family laptop, student loan calculators, financial aid appeals, GoFundMe pages she'd look at but never create, because pride was the one luxury she refused to give up. Our life was small, but honest. Friday nights were movie nights. We'd make popcorn on the stove, the real kind, not microwave, and Chloe would pick something on Netflix, and Mom would fall asleep 20 minutes in, and I'd cover her with the Afghan that Grandma Rose had crocheted before she died. Saturday mornings, I'd drive to the farmer's market and buy whatever vegetables were cheapest, and I'd cook big batches of soup for the week. I had a boyfriend, sort of. His name was Tyler, and he worked at the same real estate office as a showing assistant. He was 25, drove a Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, and had a smile that made you forget he had absolutely no ambition. We'd been seeing each other casually for about 4 months. Dinner at Applebee's, occasional Netflix at his place, the kind of relationship that exists because neither person has the energy to find something better. "You're too pretty to be answering phones," Tyler told me once, like it was a compliment. "And you're too smart to be showing condos to people who can't get approved for a mortgage," I'd replied. He'd laughed. I hadn't. That was my life. Ordinary, paycheck to paycheck. A family held together by routine and stubbornness. I didn't dream big because dreaming big in Bridgeport felt like standing on the roof of our building and trying to touch the clouds. You'd just end up looking foolish and cold. Then my mother's old college roommate called. Her name was Diana Ashworth. And if you think that sounds like a name from a soap opera, you're not wrong, because everything that happened next felt exactly like one. Mom and Diana had roomed together at UConn for 2 years before Mom dropped out to marry my dad. Diana had stayed, graduated, gone on to marry Richard Ashworth, who owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across New England. Diana lived in Greenwich now, a $3.2 million colonial on Round Hill Road, and she and Mom had kept in touch the way old college friends do. Christmas cards, the occasional Facebook comment, a phone call every 2 or 3 years that lasted too long and changed nothing. But this call was different. I was in the kitchen making lentil soup when Mom answered the phone. I wasn't paying attention at first, just chopping onions and listening to the radio. But then Mom's voice changed. It got higher, tighter. She started pacing, which she only did when she was nervous. "Diana, what do you mean? No, that's not how things work." Chop, chop, chop. I kept my eyes on the cutting board. "His family? The Hargroves? Diana, I've read about them. Everyone has. That's not our world." I looked up. Mom was standing by the window, her free hand pressed flat against the glass like she was trying to hold the world at a distance. "How old is he?" she asked. Pause. 28. Another pause. "And he's looking? Diana, my daughter isn't this isn't a catalog." My knife stopped moving. Mom caught my eye and quickly turned away. The conversation lasted another 40 minutes. I heard fragments. Substantial family. Estate in Westport. The rumors aren't true. They'd want to meet her first. When Mom finally hung up, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at her hands for a long time. "What was that about?" I asked carefully. "Nothing," she said. Then, "Sit down, Jessica." I sat. "Diana knows a family, a very wealthy family, the Hargroves. You might have heard of them. They own Hargrove Capital, that investment firm, and about half the commercial real estate in Stamford." "Okay," I said slowly. They have a son, Nathan. He's 28. He went to Wharton. Diana says he's a good person, quiet, private. She swallowed. He's looking to get married. Looking to get married, I repeated. Like on a dating app? No, more formally. His family wants to find someone suitable, someone from a good background. Mom, we live in apartment 4C. Our toilet runs all night. What good background? Someone with values, she corrected, and there was an edge in her voice now. Someone grounded. Diana told them about you, about how you work hard, take care of the family. They were interested. Interested, I said, and the word tasted like metal. In me. A family worth, what, hundreds of millions, is interested in a girl who makes $36,000 a year before taxes. Mom looked at me, and here's what broke my heart. There was hope in her eyes. Real, desperate, gasping hope. The kind of hope that lives at the bottom of an empty bank account. Diana says they'd take care of everything, she whispered. Chloe's tuition, our debts, everything. All they want is to meet you. That's not all they want, Mom. Just meet them. That's all I'm asking. One dinner. I should have said no. Every instinct in my body was screaming no. Because I'd heard of the Hargroves. Everyone in Connecticut had. Old money, older secrets. And Nathan Hargrove specifically had rumors swirling around him like smoke. Nothing confirmed. Nothing you could point to and say, there, that's the problem. Just whispers. A broken engagement 2 years prior that nobody would discuss. A former girlfriend who'd moved to Europe suddenly. Staff at their Westport estate who signed ND as thicker than phone books. But I looked at my mother's cracked hands. I thought about Chloe's college applications sitting on the desk like lottery tickets we couldn't afford to cash. I thought about the radiator and the carpet and the dumpster and the $200 checks from Florida that had stopped coming. One dinner, I said. Mom smiled. And something in that smile, something sharp and calculating that I'd never seen before, should have been my first warning. The dinner was arranged for the following Saturday at Diana's house in Greenwich. Mom spent $140 we didn't have on a dress for me from Nordstrom Rack. A navy blue wrap dress that she said brought out my eyes. She curled my hair herself, standing behind me in the bathroom mirror, and for a moment it felt like prom night all over again. Except the stakes were infinitely higher, and nobody was pretending this was about fun. Just be yourself, Mom said, adjusting my collar. But maybe don't mention the apartment, or Bridgeport, or your father. So be myself, minus my entire life. Jessica, her voice was firm. This is an opportunity. Don't you dare waste it. Diana's house was everything our apartment wasn't. Marble floors, a kitchen bigger than our entire unit, fresh flowers in every room, not grocery store carnations, but arrangements that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a degree in making things beautiful. Diana herself was warm, blonde, impeccably dressed, and she hugged me like we were family, which we weren't. You're even prettier than your photos, she said, holding me at arm's length. Nathan is going to love you. Nathan. He arrived 20 minutes late, which I later learned was unusual for him. He drove himself, a black Mercedes, nothing flashy by Greenwich standards. When he walked through the door, I was surprised. The rumors had painted a picture of someone dark, maybe dangerous. But Nathan Hargrove was quiet, tall, thin, with brown hair that needed a cut and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He wore a blazer that fit well but not perfectly, and his shoes were expensive but scuffed, like he actually walked in them. "Hi," he said, and extended his hand. His grip was gentle, almost tentative. "I'm Nathan. You must be Jessica." "That's me," I said, and immediately felt stupid. But he smiled, a small, careful smile, and said, "I like your dress. Navy blue is my favorite color." Dinner was roasted salmon and asparagus. Diana and Mom did most of the talking, filling silences with compliments and logistics and the kind of social choreography that women learn when the stakes are financial. Nathan and I barely spoke for the first hour. But I noticed things. He ate slowly, methodically. He asked Diana's housekeeper, Maria, how her son's soccer tournament had gone. When his phone buzzed 3 times, he silenced it without looking. After dinner, Diana suggested Nathan and I take a walk in the garden. It was October, and the air smelled like dying leaves and someone's distant fireplace. We walked along a stone path lined with boxwood hedges, and for a while, neither of us said anything. Then Nathan stopped and turned to me. "I know what this is," he said quietly. "I know what they've arranged, and I want you to know that I think it's strange. I've told my parents I think it's strange, but they're insistent, and I've learned that fighting my family is like fighting the weather." I blinked. "That's honest. I don't have much else to offer." He pushed his glasses up. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this is normal. A girl from Bridgeport, a guy from Westport, meeting through our mother's old college connection because his family has decided it's time he gets married. It sounds like a bad Hallmark movie." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Hallmark movies at least have meet cutes. This is more like a business merger. "Exactly," he said, and then softer. "But you seem kind, and I don't meet many kind people." Something in his voice made my chest tighten. Not attraction, not yet. Something sadder. Recognition, maybe. The sound of someone who was lonely in a way that money couldn't fix. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "The rumors about you, about your last engagement, about—" "They're not true," he said quickly. Too quickly. Then he took a breath. "Most of them aren't true. But I can't explain everything right now. Not here, not tonight. I just need you to know that I'm not dangerous. I'm not cruel. I'm just—" He trailed off, looking at the hedges like they might finish his sentence. "You're just what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. "If you decide to move forward with this, and I'll understand completely if you don't, read this first. Not now. Later, when you're alone." I took the paper. It was warm from his body heat. We walked back inside. Mom's eyes were bright and searching when she looked at me. Diana was already pouring champagne. Nathan shook my hand again at the door, and this time his grip lingered for half a second longer. In the car on the way home, Mom was practically vibrating. "Well, what did he say? What did you think? He's handsome, isn't he? A little quiet, but quiet is good. Quiet means stable. Diana says Mom, stop. She stopped. I reached into my purse and felt the folded paper between my fingers. I didn't open it yet. I waited until we were home, until Mom was in bed, until Chloe was asleep with her textbook open on her chest. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, unfolded the paper, and read the 3 sentences Nathan Hargrove had written in small, careful handwriting. My hands went cold. I read it again and again. And I sat there in the dark of apartment 4C, listening to the radiator clank and the dumpster lid bang in the wind. And I realized that whatever I'd expected from this arrangement, money, security, a better life for my family, the truth was going to be something else entirely. And I had no idea whether that something else would save me or destroy me. The note said 3 things. 3 sentences in Nathan's careful handwriting on cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of cologne. I am not what my family says I am. I am not what the rumors say I am. And I need someone to help me survive what's coming, more than I need a wife. I read those words 17 times that night. I counted. Each time, they rearranged themselves in my mind, forming new questions. What was coming? What did his family say he was? And what kind of man asks a stranger for help on a folded piece of paper like a kid passing notes in class? I should have walked away. But the next morning, Chloe got a letter from Johns Hopkins. She'd been accepted into the biomedical engineering program with a partial scholarship that still left a gap of $31,400 per year. She sat at the kitchen table, holding that letter like it was made of glass, and her eyes were so bright, so full of a future she could taste. And I watched my mother's face crumble behind her coffee mug, because we all knew there was no way. I called Diana that afternoon. Tell Nathan I'd like to see him again. We met 6 more times over the following 2 months, always in public, a cafe in Westport, a bookstore in New Haven, once at the Yale Art Gallery where we stood in front of a Rothko painting, and Nathan told me he'd always felt like that. Layers of something intense, but from the outside, people just see a blur. He was strange. I won't pretend he wasn't. He spoke slowly, chose words like they cost money. He didn't touch me. Not a hand on my back, not a brush of fingers. But he listened like no one had ever listened to me before. When I told him about my dad leaving, about Patrice and the timeshares, he didn't say I'm sorry like everyone else. He said, "Do you miss who he was, or do you miss having a father?" Nobody had ever asked me that. On our 5th meeting, at a quiet Italian restaurant in Stamford, he told me about his family. His father, Charles Hargrove, had built Hargrove Capital into a $600 million firm through what Nathan called strategic ruthlessness. His mother, Victoria, was a society fixture who treated reputation like currency. Every interaction was a transaction. Every relationship had a balance sheet. "They need me married," Nathan said, twirling pasta he wasn't eating. "It's not about love, it's about optics. The board of Hargrove Capital is meeting in March to vote on leadership succession. My father is stepping down. I'm supposed to take over. But several board members have expressed concerns about my stability." "Your stability?" "The rumors, Jessica. The broken engagement. The stories." He set down his fork. "My ex-fiancée, Rachel. She left because my mother made her life unbearable. Victoria Hargrove doesn't want a daughter-in-law. She wants an employee. Rachel couldn't handle it, and when she tried to leave quietly, my mother spread stories to make sure no one believed her side. Rachel moved to London because she couldn't get a job in New York anymore. My mother's reach is extensive. My stomach turned. And the other rumors? The darker ones? Nathan looked at me with eyes that held something I could only describe as exhaustion. My mother started those too, to keep women away from me, to keep me isolated, dependent, controllable. If everyone thinks I'm dangerous, no one gets close enough to see what's really happening in that house. What's really happening? He reached across the table. For the first time, his hand touched mine. My mother controls everything. My finances, my schedule, my medical records. I'm 28 years old, and I have an allowance. I can't access my trust fund until I'm married. That was the condition my grandfather set. Victoria has spent years making sure I never got married, never got independent, never escaped. But now my father needs me at the company, and a married Nathan is the only version the board will accept. So she's agreed, reluctantly, furiously. Nathan, this sounds controlling, abusive. He smiled bitterly. Men aren't supposed to say those words about their mothers, but yes. I pulled my hand back. Not because I didn't believe him. I did. Every word resonated with a terrible clarity. I pulled back because I was suddenly aware of the weight of what he was asking. This wasn't a marriage. It was an escape plan. And I was the door. We were married 11 weeks later at the Hargrove estate in Westport. 300 guests, a 12-tier cake, flowers flown in from Ecuador. My dress cost more than my mother's annual salary, a Vera Wang that Victoria had selected without consulting me. Chloe was my maid of honor, and she squeezed my hand before I walked down the aisle and whispered, "You don't have to do this." But I did. Because 2 weeks before the wedding, a check for $125,600 had appeared in my mother's bank account. 4 years of Chloe's tuition gap, paid in full. Our apartment lease had been bought out, and Mom moved into a 2-bedroom condo in Milford that smelled like fresh paint instead of old carpet. The radiator didn't clank. The toilet didn't run. The price of all that comfort was a ring on my finger and a man I was still trying to understand. Victoria Hargrove watched me walk down the aisle with a smile that never reached her eyes. She wore ivory, almost white, and when I'd mentioned this to Diana the day before, Diana had gone quiet and said, "Pick your battles. That's not the one you want to fight first." Now I'm back where I started, the honeymoon suite, the locked door, Nathan with his back against it, fear on his face. "Jessica," he said, "there's something I need to tell you before anything else happens tonight." I stood in the middle of the room, still in my wedding dress, my feet aching from 4 hours in heels. "Tell me." He walked to the minibar, poured himself a glass of water, drank it in one long swallow. Then he turned to me. "My mother is going to try to annul our marriage. She has a lawyer, Gerald Fisk, from Fisk and Associates in Hartford, and they've already drafted the paperwork. She's been planning this since before the ceremony." The room tilted. "What?" "She agreed to the wedding because my father forced her hand, but she never intended for it to last. The plan is to file for annulment on grounds of fraud, claiming I was mentally incapacitated and couldn't consent. She has a psychiatrist, Dr. Leonard Pratt, who's been writing false reports about me for years. Reports that say I'm unstable, delusional, unable to make decisions for myself. I sat on the edge of the bed. The silk of my dress pooled around me like water. Nathan, if she annuls the marriage, your trust fund stays locked. I stay under her control. And you... He looked at me with anguish. The prenup has a clause. If the marriage is annulled within 30 days, everything they gave your family gets clawed back. Chloe's tuition, your mother's condo, all of it. My blood went cold, literally cold. I could feel it in my fingertips, in my ears. She can't do that. She can. Gerald Fisk wrote the prenup. I didn't have my own lawyer review it. That was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Jessica. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Steadier than it had any right to be. How long do we have? She'll file Monday morning. We have 36 hours. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat on opposite sides of the hotel bed with Nathan's laptop between us, and he showed me everything. Emails between Victoria and Gerald Fisk discussing the annulment strategy. Dr. Pratt's psychiatric evaluations. Pages of fabricated diagnoses. Bank records showing that Victoria had been siphoning money from Nathan's trust into accounts she controlled, roughly $4.2 million over 6 years. Why didn't you fight this before? I asked at 3 a.m., my eyes burning. With what? She controls the money. She controls the narrative. Every lawyer I've contacted has backed off after one phone call from her. She sits on the boards of 2 hospitals and the Connecticut Bar Foundation. She doesn't just have connections, she is the connection. There has to be someone she can't reach. Nathan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There's one person. My grandfather's former attorney. His name is Howard Marsh. He's 81, retired, lives in a cabin in Litchfield. He drafted the original trust documents. He hates my mother. And he's the only person alive who knows the full terms of my grandfather's trust." At 6 a.m. on Sunday morning, still in yesterday's clothes, I drove Nathan's Mercedes 2 hours north to Litchfield, while Nathan stayed at the hotel to maintain appearances. Victoria had arranged a post-wedding brunch for noon, and if Nathan didn't show, she'd know something was wrong. Howard Marsh lived at the end of a dirt road that my GPS tried to deny existed. His cabin was small, wooden, surrounded by birch trees. A golden retriever barked at me from the porch. Howard himself appeared in the doorway, tall, stooped, with white hair and eyes that were still sharp enough to cut glass. "You're the new wife," he said, not a question. "I'm Jessica." "I know who you are. Diana Ashworth called me last week. Come in." His cabin smelled like pipe tobacco and old books. He made me coffee in a percolator, actual percolator, like my grandmother used to have, and sat across from me at a table covered in legal pads. "Victoria is going to try to annul your marriage," he said calmly. "You knew?" "I've been waiting for it. She's been positioning for this move for 3 years. The psychiatric evaluations, the NDA'd staff, the rumors about Nathan, all of it was groundwork. She never wanted him free. A free Nathan means an independent Nathan, and an independent Nathan might actually look at the trust's financial records and discover what she's been doing. The $4.2 million. Howard's eyebrows rose. He told you that number? It's actually closer to $7 million. She's been skimming since Nathan's grandfather died in 2016. The trust was supposed to be managed by an independent trustee, but Victoria had herself appointed as interim trustee through a court motion that Nathan never knew about. She forged his signature on the consent form. That's fraud. That's a felony. Howard reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila folder. I've been building this file for 4 years. Bank statements, the forged signature compared to Nathan's real one. I hired a handwriting analyst. Copies of Dr. Pratt's real notes versus the ones he submitted to the court. A nurse at his office, woman named Sandra Chen, smuggled them out because she couldn't stomach what he was doing. Emails between Victoria and Gerald Fisk discussing how to keep Nathan manageable. He slid the folder across the table. It was heavy. It felt like ammunition. Why didn't you do something with this yourself? I asked. Because I'm 81 years old. I have no legal standing, and Victoria's lawyers would eat me alive in court. But you're his wife. As of yesterday, you have standing. You can petition the probate court on Nathan's behalf. You can file a complaint with the Connecticut Bar Association against Gerald Fisk. You can take this folder to the FBI field office in New Haven because wire fraud is a federal crime. I drove back to Manhattan with that folder on the passenger seat. My hands were steady on the wheel. Something had shifted inside me overnight. Something hard and certain, like a bone setting after a break. The brunch was still happening when I arrived. Victoria Hargrove stood at the center of the hotel restaurant in a cream Chanel suit, holding court among society wives. She saw me walk in, and her smile sharpened. Jessica, darling, you look tired. Rough night? Wonderful night, actually. I kissed Nathan on the cheek. He looked at me with a question in his eyes, and I squeezed his hand twice. Our signal. I have it. Monday morning, Victoria's lawyer, Gerald Fisk, filed the annulment petition at 9:07 a.m. at the Stamford courthouse. At 9:12 a.m., our lawyer, a woman named Patricia Haynes from a firm in New Haven that Howard Marsh had recommended, a firm Victoria had no connections to, filed an emergency motion to block the annulment, along with a counterpetition to remove Victoria as trustee of the Hargrove Family Trust. At 9:30 a.m., I personally walked into the FBI field office in New Haven and handed a copy of Howard Marsh's folder to Special Agent David Moretti. At 10:15 a.m., Patricia Haynes filed a formal complaint against Dr. Leonard Pratt with the Connecticut Medical Examining Board, including Sandra Chen's sworn affidavit and the discrepancies between his real clinical notes and his submitted evaluations. Victoria found out at noon. Nathan told me later that she called him 17 times in 1 hour. He didn't answer. For the first time in his life, he didn't answer. The hearing happened 3 weeks later. Judge Karen Wheeler, Stamford Probate Court. Victoria arrived with Gerald Fisk and 2 associates. Nathan and I arrived with Patricia Haynes and Howard Marsh, who'd driven down from Litchfield in a suit he said he hadn't worn since 1998. The courtroom was small and smelled like floor polish. Victoria sat on her side with perfect posture, her face a mask of controlled fury. She looked at me once, just once, and in that look was every ounce of contempt a woman can hold for another woman she underestimated. Patricia presented the evidence methodically: the forged signature, the siphoned funds, Dr. Pratt's falsified reports. Sandra Chen testified via video link, her voice shaking but clear. Howard Marsh testified about the original trust terms and Victoria's unauthorized appointment as trustee. Gerald Fisk tried to object, tried to redirect, tried to discredit, but the documents were relentless. Numbers don't lie, and Victoria had left a trail of them. $7 million worth. When it was Victoria's turn to speak, she stood and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, everything I did was to protect my son. Nathan is fragile. He's always been fragile. I was trying to—" "Mrs. Hargrove," Judge Wheeler interrupted. "Your son graduated summa cum laude from Wharton. He passed the Series 7 and Series 66 on his first attempt. He speaks 3 languages. The only evidence of his alleged fragility comes from a psychiatrist who is currently under investigation for falsifying medical records. Do you have anything else?" Victoria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in perhaps her entire life, Victoria Hargrove had no words. The judge ruled that afternoon. The annulment petition was denied. Victoria was removed as trustee, replaced by an independent fiduciary appointed by the court. Nathan was granted full access to his trust fund, $23.4 million. Gerald Fisk was referred to the state bar for ethics violations, and the FBI investigation into the wire fraud was officially opened. Victoria walked out of that courtroom without looking at anyone. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. Precise, deliberate, final. Just like the lock on our honeymoon suite door. But this time, the sound meant something different. It meant the door was opening, not closing. Nathan cried in the car afterward. Not dramatically, just quiet tears rolling down his face while he stared out the window at the Stamford skyline. I held his hand and said nothing, because some moments don't need words. 6 months later, Victoria was indicted on 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of forgery. She pled no contest and received 2 years of probation, a $350,000 fine, and a lifetime ban from serving as trustee of any trust or estate. The society pages in Greenwich were brutal. Diana Ashworth told me later that Victoria's Christmas card list went from 400 to 11. Gerald Fisk was disbarred. Dr. Leonard Pratt surrendered his medical license before the board could revoke it. Charles Hargrove, Nathan's father, never spoke publicly about any of it. He stepped down from Hargrove Capital quietly, and Nathan took over as CEO. The board voted unanimously. Nathan's first act was establishing a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in Connecticut. He named it the Chloe Fund, which made my sister cry so hard she couldn't finish her acceptance speech at the launch event. As for me and Nathan, we fell in love slowly. Not the way it happens in movies, with a single electric moment. More like the way dawn happens, gradually, then all at once, until you look up and realize the whole sky has changed. He brought me coffee every morning without being asked. I learned he was afraid of thunderstorms and loved crossword puzzles, and could name every constellation visible from our back porch in Westport. We argued about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher. We adopted a cat named Rothko, after that painting at the Yale Gallery. Mom never apologized for pushing me into the arrangement. I don't think she knows how. But she came to dinner every Sunday, and she held my hand one evening in the kitchen and said, "You were always braver than me, Jessica. I just didn't know it until now." Chloe graduated from Johns Hopkins last spring. Biomedical engineering. Top of her class. She's starting a PhD program in the fall, and she'll never have to worry about a tuition gap again. I still have the note. That folded piece of paper Nathan gave me in Diana's garden. 3 sentences that changed my life. I keep it in the drawer of my nightstand, next to a photo of Grandma Rose's Afghan and the acceptance letter from Johns Hopkins. Sometimes at night, when the house is quiet and Nathan is asleep beside me, I unfold it and read those words again. I need someone to help me survive what's coming. And I think about how I walked into that marriage expecting to be saved, only to discover that the saving went both ways. That's the thing nobody tells you about rescue. It's never one-directional. You reach for someone's hand in the dark, and when you pull them up, you find your own feet on solid ground for the first time. The silk of my wedding dress is packed in a box in the attic now. I never had it preserved. It still has a coffee stain on the hem from that first sleepless night at the Mark Hotel, when we sat on opposite sides of the bed and planned our revolution. I wouldn't wash that stain out for anything in the world.